Hi everyone! Today I'm going to show you how I made this rib sweater on my Sentro. About a year ago I made one for my sister, but I thought I'd make an improved version of this design. In this one I minimized the number of ends to weave in, I used waist yarn to better control the cast on edge, and I also have the body panels sewn down to only my waist, but feel free to sew it all the way down like I did in the first one if that's what you prefer. For materials I'm using a 48 pin Sentro Knitting Machine, a 5mm crochet hook, 280 grams of medium weight yarn, and also some waist yarn, pretty much any yarn you don't mind cutting up, measuring tape, stitch markers, and a yarn needle, and of course some scissors. For the construction, I'll be making 2 body panels and 2 sleeve panels with the stockinette stitch, and I'll rework each panel to create this ribbing as I go, and once all the panels are done, I'll sew the pieces together to make the sweater. I'm going to be making a size medium, and for reference, my shoulder width is about 14 inches across, but the panels are very stretchy, so it could stretch up to 17 inches. This will be 44 stitches by 88 rows. The other measurement to keep in mind is the circumference around your shoulder where the sleeve would attach. Mine is 13.5 inches, so I did 35 stitches by 96 rows. For larger sizes, you might need to create 2 panels and sew them together since the Sentro only has 48 hooks, but if there's enough interest, I can create a tutorial around that too. Let me know in the comments. I also really want to involve you guys more in these videos, so hopefully I can use my platform to promote and share other fiber artists. So if you make this top and want to share it with me and my audience, send me a message on Instagram that you'd like to submit to be in a video, and that goes for my previous tutorials as well. Alright, let's get started with the front panel. I'm going to be working in a panel, but I'll set my machine to tube so it doesn't lock up like it does here. So I'll just set it to tube, and you can see that you can turn past the first hook. And using the waist yarn, I'll cast on 44. So I'll put my yarn underneath the first hook and start guiding the working end one in front and one behind until I get to the 44th hook. Now that I'm at the 44th hook, I'll put it around the outside notch and then place the yarn into the yarn guide. And for tension, I'm going to be using a loose tension position. Then I'll knit about 5 rows with the waist yarn. The waist yarn is really just to make sure that the stitches stay secure when working on the ribbing, since I'm going to be unfurling a column of stitches later on. So the number is kind of arbitrary, but it helps to have a good base on there. Now that I have my 5 rows, I'm going to cut the excess and remove the tail end from the yarn guide and place it into the center of the machine, so I can switch to my actual sweater yarn. Now I'm going to roughly measure out around 3 times my shoulder width, and this is because I'm going to use this length to slip stitch the bottom, and this is going to reduce the number of ends to weave in later on. This I find helps a lot because it reduces the ends by 2 for each panel, so since there's 4 panels, it's 8 less ends to weave in. Alright, so all I did here was put the tail into the center of the machine. I guided the working end into the first hook and into the yarn guide. And now I'm going to start knitting. And I'll go ahead and knit 88 rows. To keep track, I'm going to use an app called Row Counter on my phone. So now I'll just continue making rows in this panel with my sweater yarn until I get to 88 rows. And I'll meet you guys back here once that's done. Now that I have 88 rows knit, I'm going to cut the excess, and this is going to be just 1 shoulder length width because I'm only using this end to hold the cast off end while I do the ribbing. Now I'll feed it through my yarn needle and remove the end from the yarn guide. Now I'll just turn past all these hooks and start picking up stitches from the closest side. I had a couple stitches pop off, but that's okay, I'm just picking those up, and I'm going to continue picking up the rest of the stitches. Now my first panel is done, and I'm just going to do one more step before I start on the ribbing, which is securing the cast on end. Because of the waist yarn, you can very easily see where it starts. So I'm going to be slip stitching through each of those loops from the purl side. To do this, I'm going to hold the tail end like it's my working yarn. I'll insert my hook into the first loop from the back, then I'll pull the working yarn through to place my first loop on the hook. And then I'll go ahead and just start creating slip stitches into each of these loops. Just be sure to make these stitches really loose because this can limit how much your panel will stretch. Okay, so I'll go ahead and slip stitch through all of the loops in this row. Once I finish the last stitch, I'm just going to do another chain 1 and then I'll pull the end through. Now, because I did my slip stitches very loosely, you can see that this end is still very stretchy, and this is good because that kind of sets the maximum amount of stretch that this end can do. To create the ribbing, I'm going to attach another piece of yarn to do this. From my skein of yarn, I'm going to create a slip knot and place it on my crochet hook. Now I'll position my work so that the cast off yarn is on the right side, and I'm going to slip stitch into the first 2 stitches and unfurl the third. To do this, I'm pulling the cast off yarn out of the first 3 stitches. So the first 2 stitches are protected because I slip stitched them, and then for the third stitch, I want to unfurl this. So I'm going to let this come completely undone. Now we're going to be using the crochet hook, so you can either pull a really long loop like I did here or place a stitch marker in this. Now I'm going to let this column of stitches come completely undone until I get to the very first row. The loop that I just pulled out of the waste yarn is where I'm going to insert my hook. I'll turn my work to the purl side and place my hook into that loop. Now from the back, I'm going to yarn over and pull through with each of these dropped rows. So here it is a bit slower, just so you get the idea. And this is what's going to create a knit on the back and a purl on the front, which will create the ribbing. And I'm going to keep doing this until I get to the very top. So here I'm creating a column of knits on the back, and people may say that you might as well just hand knit, but I still find this to be a lot faster because 2/3 of the stitches are machine knit, and this motion of yarning over and pulling through with a crochet hook is just super fast and really easy to get the hang of. So this is great for beginners and people who like to use their knitting machine. Now that I've done all the rows, I'm going to remove my hook and place it back into the very long loop I pulled. Then I'll pick up the last row stitch and then pull the really long loop back to a reasonable size, and then do a slip stitch. Now I have the first 3 stitches done, so I'm going to repeat this method to create a pattern of knit 2, purl 1. So I'm going to do another 2 slip stitches. And I kind of had to pull the loop up by the cast off yarn just to make it easier to insert my hook. So I've done 2 slip stitches, and then after finding the 3rd stitch from there, I'm going to pull the cast off yarn from all 3 of these and pull a very long loop again so that my work doesn't come undone, and I'll start unfurling this new column. And I'll do that all the way to the first row once again. Then I'll pick up the last row from the back and then work all the way up, creating knits until I get to the top once again. Here you can see I've made it to the top, and I'm just going to insert my hook back into the very long loop, pull that back to a reasonable length, and I'll pick up the last row. And just a tip, if you're slip stitching a purl like I am here, you'll insert your hook through the back and have the working yarn in the front, and that will make sure that the top slip stitch also looks like a purl. Like so. And if you're slip stitching a knit, it's going to be the opposite, so I'm going to insert my hook through the front and have the working yarn in the back, and that'll just make it look like a knit. I didn't do this in the first iteration of my rib sweater, and that's why the ends are kind of like wavy. But my sister actually really liked that effect. She thought I had done that intentionally, like a lettuce trim top. So you can do it whatever way you prefer. It'll just turn out a little bit cleaner if you watch out for the direction of the slip stitches. Now I'll continue repeating these steps until I get to the end of the panel. After slip stitching and releasing the last stitch, I'll do one more chain 1 and pull the end through. Now to make this extra secure, I'm going to do a square knot on these 2 ends together. And here is my first front panel all done. You can see how stretchy it is. And now I can remove the waste yarn from the cast on edge. So you can pull the end out like I'm doing here and release it row by row until you have just your panel left. The front and back for this top are identical, so I'm going to repeat the exact same steps to create another body panel for the back. And then I'll show you the small variation for the sleeve. For the sleeve panels, the only difference is that I'll cast on 35 stitches instead, so here I am with my waste yarn. And then once I have my actual yarn on there, I will knit 96 rows. Then I'll carry on with the same steps by securing the bottom, creating the ribbing, and then removing the waste yarn. After making 2 sleeves, I'll have all 4 of my panels, and here they are. They're all like ribbed, and you can see how stretchy they are. Right, and we're very close to the finish line. We just need to sew these together. Now I'm going to start with the sleeves, making the panels closed into tubes. So here I have the wrong side facing up of one sleeve, and I'm just going to bring the 2 ends together. I'll make a square knot with these 2 ends just to make it extra secure. One of my tail ends is a bit longer than the length of the sleeve, so I'm going to use that to sew it together. Here I did a few already, and this is just a standard mattress stitch. From here, I'm just finding the column of stitches closest to the edge and picking up 2 crossbars from each side, like so. Here's one side, and then I'll do the other side. And then I'll just keep alternating between the 2. Now here's my sleeve all sewn up, and I'm just going to create another square knot with the ends. That's one sleeve, and I'll do the same process on the other sleeve panel. Now moving on to the body panels, I'm going to sew these together with the wrong sides facing each other. And then I'm going to place some stitch markers on the shoulder side for where I'm going to join them. I placed 4 stitch markers for where I'm going to sew the shoulders together. I only have 9 stitches in between these. Since this is going to be a straight neckline, I want to make sure that it'll actually fit over my head. If you want to check if this will fit over your head, just take the circumference of your head, divide that by 2, and make sure that the neck opening will be able to stretch to that much. Now I'm going to tie these ends together and use one of the longer ones to sew the shoulders together. I threaded my yarn needle with these ends, and much like the vertical to vertical mattress stitch, I'm going to do a horizontal to horizontal mattress stitch. I'll alternate between the 2 sides, picking up the 2 loops that would create the V of a stitch, and then switch to the other side and pick up the other 2 loops that would create the V of the stitch. And you can see here that I'm treating the purl stitches the same way. And I'll carry on doing that for the 9 stitches between the stitch markers. And afterwards, I'll tie this end off. Then I did the same on the other side. Now I have my neck hole done, and then I'm going to attach the sleeves. And I'm going to use stitch markers to place them because I want to make sure that this is going to be stretched enough to fit my arm length. So my shoulder circumference was about 13.5, but I'm just going to round to 14 to make the numbers easier. Divide that by 2, meaning I want to make the sleeve stretch up to 7 inches where it attaches to the body panel. So here you can see that my sleeve does stretch up to 7 inches, and if yours doesn't stretch up to half of your shoulder circumference, you might want to make your slip stitches a little bit looser. And now I'll use some stitch markers to attach the sleeve ends to roughly where 7 inches would end. Here it is attached. Because the body panel and the sleeve panel are a different amount of stitches, I'm going to do a 2-to-1 ratio of stitches. So the body panel also 2 stitches and the sleeve panel also 1. And this is all to maintain the stretch of the sleeve. I have my thread secured to the top, and now I'm going to pick up 2 loops from the sleeve side. Then on the body panel, I'll pick up the crossbars for 2 stitches. Now I'll continue sewing until I get to the bottom of the front side of the sleeve. On the back side, I'm going to continue sewing the sleeve by attaching a new piece of yarn to the top where the shoulder is, and this will allow me to finish the sleeve and also sew down the body panel. I also stitch marked where I was going to stop sewing the body panels together because I kind of like the open look, and I think it also accentuates the waistline, but that's totally up to you if you want to do the same or if you want to sew it all the way down. After I finish sewing the sleeve, I'm going to switch back to sewing 2 crossbars to 2 crossbars on either side of the panels. And once I make it to where my stitch marker is, I'll secure that end and then repeat the same process on the other sleeve to attach it to the body, and then sew the other side of the body panels together. Okay, so here is the sweater. I just need to sew in the ends. Once you've sewn in all your ends, the top is finished. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and if you've made the sweater and want to share it with me, feel free to @ me on Instagram or TikTok. My username is Kim's Threads. I would be so happy to see it. And if you want your finished piece to be in one of my future videos, send me a message on Instagram. And bye for now!